The old sensors at Relay 7 had not triggered a genuine unknown contact in 41 years. So when the alert chimed at low priority across the dim third-shift displays, analyst Reth almost silenced it without looking. He was halfway through a cold ration pack and a report on gate traffic delays. He glanced at the screen only because the chime repeated, which the system was not supposed to do for low-priority flags. The signal was narrow, tight beam, pointed at a coordinate that held nothing anymore. Reth ran the frequency through the station's reference library. The result came back in under a second. The frequency was registered to Earth Space Command, retired from use in 2089, when Earth Space Command was dissolved and its assets folded into the Teresi Compact's Human Stewardship Program. That was 242 years ago. Reth sat up straight and stopped eating. He filed an escalation request. His supervisor, a broad-shouldered Teresi named Dune who had managed deep space monitoring stations for 30 years, sent back a single line. Sensor ghosts happen, log it and move on. Reth logged it. Then he kept watching. The signal did not stop. It grew stronger. It was not a ghost. It was a ship far out, moving at a speed his passive sensors could not classify. He filed a second escalation with raw signal data and a trajectory projection attached. Dune came to the monitoring bay in person, looked at the display, said nothing, then filed his own escalation 3 levels above Reth's head marked urgent. By the time the object resolved on long-range optical, the station had been awake 2 hours, and a patrol fleet of 6 Teresi warships was burning toward the contact. The silhouette was battered. Hull plating scored as if dragged through something catastrophic. Parts of its frame twisted in ways that suggested total structural failure. But the ship was whole, and the reactor reading from the first active scan made Dune go very still. He had never seen a number like that, not from any ship of any species in any register he had worked with. The ship matched no current compact design. A junior analyst cross-referenced the silhouette against pre-stewardship archived records, and the match came back at 97% confidence. UES Resolute, United Earth Ship, designation Deep Space Warship, commissioned 2029, last recorded position Outer System Survey 2031, status missing, presumed destroyed. 300 years gone. Dune opened a channel using the old Earth Space Command protocol prefix still in the archived library, out of some instinct he could not name. The channel opened immediately, as if someone on the other end had been waiting. The voice was calm, male, speaking unaccented standard English, the older variant, the kind not common in human colonies for a century and a half. This is Captain Adrian Voss of the UES Resolute. We are requesting contact with Earth Space Command or any affiliated human military authority. Please respond with current contact protocols. Dune told the captain, with the careful patience he used when speaking to humans, that Earth Space Command no longer existed, that humanity was under the protection and stewardship of the Teresi Compact, that the appropriate contact for human affairs was the Compact's Colonial Liaison Office on New Providence Station. Silence, not a bad signal, the silence of a man processing information. How long has Earth Space Command been dissolved? Approximately 240 years, Dune said. A longer silence. And what is the current status of Earth itself? Dune told him. Earth was inhabited, administered under compact oversight, classified as a heritage world with restricted development. Quite well preserved, he explained. The channel stayed open, but the Resolute went quiet for nearly a full minute. Dune heard, faintly, a second voice in the background, lower, asking something he could not make out. Then Voss returned. We will require direct communication with the senior human governing authority, not a liaison office, the actual governing body. Dune almost smiled. He explained, gently, that the Compact managed those communications on humanity's behalf, and that the Resolute should hold position and prepare for a Compact inspection team to come aboard and assess the vessel before any further steps were taken. What happened next was not loud. No explosion, no weapon discharge, no visible pulse. The 6 patrol warships, now 4 minutes from intercept, all went dark at exactly the same moment. Every sensor, every active system, every comm array, off, not damaged, off, as if something had reached across space and quietly turned them off like lights in an empty room. 8 seconds later, they came back on. Dune stared at his display. The patrol ships reported no damage, no hull breach, no system failure they could explain. They had simply stopped and started again. The Resolute had not moved. It had not raised a single visible system. It sat in space the way a stone sits at the bottom of a river, patient, heavy, unbothered. Voss's voice returned, still calm. That calmness somehow frightened Dune more than anything else. "We will not be boarded," Voss said. "Please connect us to the senior human authority. We will not ask again." Dune reached for his console with a hand that was not entirely steady, and began making calls he had never expected to make in his career. Nobody told Liaison Kale the assignment was voluntary. His supervisor put the transfer order on his desk and told him to pack light. He was being sent aboard the Resolute as an official compact observer, the diplomatic term for someone whose real job was to report everything back to the High Senate while making the humans feel respected. Kale had worked human affairs for 11 years. He knew the colonies. He had visited New Providence twice, attended human cultural events, learned enough of their older language variants to follow a conversation. He considered himself one of the Compact's more informed human affairs officers. He boarded the Resolute through a docking collar, the ship extended without being asked, the mechanism moving with a smoothness suggesting the ship itself had decided to let him in. The first thing he noticed was the smell, faintly metallic, with something underneath it he could not identify, something that reminded him of the air near a compact gate just after a transit event. He filed that observation in the back of his mind and kept walking. Lieutenant Commander Priya Nair met him at the airlock. She was shorter than he expected, with dark eyes that watched him the way a scientist watches a specimen, not unkindly, but with complete attention. She shook his hand and said she would show him around. Within 3 minutes, he was completely lost. The Resolute's corridors should have been easy to navigate. The ship's original design was on file in the Compact archive, a straightforward linear layout, standard for human warships of its era. What Kale walked through bore almost no resemblance to those plans, not because the walls had been moved, but because the walls did something to light he could not explain. Shadows fell at wrong angles. Distances between doors seemed to shift depending on which direction he was walking. He stopped twice to reorient himself, and Priya waited for him each time with the patient expression of someone long accustomed to this. She told him about the drift. Not all of it, she was selective. She told him that 11 months ago, from the crew's perspective, the Resolute had passed through a region of collapsed spacetime where normal physics did not apply. That the ship and everyone aboard had been tested in ways that were difficult to describe to someone who had not experienced them. She did not tell him what the tests involved. She did not tell him what was in the lower decks. She showed him the bridge, the medical bay, and the engineering section, where Chief Engineer Yusuf Adara gave him a polite nod from behind a console displaying information in a script Kale had never seen in any language database. Meanwhile, in the communications room, Voss was speaking to Governor Lena Hartwell of New Providence. He had been given the channel after 6 hours of compact bureaucratic resistance, which broke when Voss asked Dune, very quietly, whether the compact would prefer he made the call without their assistance. The channel opened within 20 minutes after that. Hartwell's face on the screen was older than her file photo. She had the look of someone who had been managing a slow emergency for her entire adult life, controlled, competent, very tired. When she saw Voss, she stopped mid-sentence. Then she said his name, not as a greeting, but as if confirming something she had not let herself believe. He told her who he was and the dates. He watched her face as she did the math. She held it together through the first 5 minutes with a professionalism he respected. Then he asked her to tell him everything, and she did. And somewhere in the middle of it, the professionalism cracked and she cried and kept talking at the same time, because there was too much to tell, and she was not going to waste time stopping. He listened to all of it. The stewardship taxes consuming 30% of every colonial economy. The compact controlled gate access that meant no human ship could travel between colonies without paying a transit fee. The Veth Dominion raids on outlying human settlements that the compact had answered with formal letters of concern and nothing else. The generation of human children who grew up learning their species was young, fragile, and needed to be managed by people who knew better. When she finished, he asked for the complete record, every treaty, every tariff schedule, every incident report. She sent it. He read it in 6 hours. When he finished, he sat at his desk for a while without moving. In the observation deck, Cale stood alone looking out at the stars. He had filed his first report to the High Senate. It was accurate. It was also, he realized, completely insufficient. No report could convey what it actually felt like to stand inside this ship, to walk its wrong-angled corridors, to watch the crew speak to each other with the quiet ease of people who had survived something together that no language had words for yet. He filed an addendum. He wrote simply, "This ship is not what we think it is, and neither are its crew. Recommend full Senate attention immediately." He did not know if anyone would listen. In his experience, the Senate listened when it was already too late. He was beginning to think that might be exactly what was about to happen. Fleet Admiral Saru of the Veth Dominion did not watch the recordings of the Resolute disabling Dunes patrol fleet with fear. He watched them with irritation. He played the footage 4 times, had his technical staff analyze the sensor logs, then dismissed them. He sat alone with the data for 1 hour. Then he called his flag captain and told him to prepare a task force. 30 warships. He was not being subtle. Subtlety was a tool for powers that lacked the ability to be direct. The Dominion had spent 60 years establishing that human space was a soft border, porous, manageable, useful. A single strange ship crewed by confused humans from a dead era was not going to change that. The situation required a reminder. The fleet would park in orbit around New Providence, and the humans would see, as they always saw, that history could be interrupted but not reversed. The task force dropped out of FTL transit 6 hours from New Providence and immediately received a hail. Not from the colony. From the Resolute, sitting between the fleet and the system, alone, completely stationary, broadcasting on a human military frequency not used in living memory. Saru took the channel himself. The voice identified itself as Captain Adrian Voss. It stated, without hostility and without urgency, that the task force was approaching a human system and requested it reverse course. Saru looked at his display. 1 ship, against 30. He almost did not respond. The gap in capability was so complete that a response felt like ceremony. But he had watched the recording 4 times, and something in him wanted to hear what the human said when told no. He told Voss the fleet was conducting a lawful patrol under historical access agreements, and the Resolute should stand clear. Voss said, "I am going to ask you one more time." Saru said, "Then ask." Voss said, "Please turn your fleet around." Saru opened his mouth. He did not get the chance. The 3 destroyers at the point of his formation simply vanished. Not destroyed, no explosion, no debris, no weapon signature. They were on his sensor display, and then they were not. The remaining 27 ships registered the absence, and their captains began shouting across the fleet channel simultaneously. Saru silenced the channel and looked at his tactical officer, whose face had gone a color he had never seen on a Veth face before. Then the fleet stopped. Not the ships were still powered, still crewed, all systems fully operational, but not one of them could move. Not one drive system responded. Every vessel sat exactly where it was, pressed in place by something invisible. Saru tried his own controls. Nothing. Every captain reported the same. Full power, full crew, full life support. Zero mobility. The channel from the Resolute was still open. Voss spoke. "The 3 ships I removed from normal space are undamaged. They will be returned in 72 hours. Your remaining fleet will regain drive function in approximately 10 minutes. What I just did is not the limit of this ship's capability. It is well below the limit. I chose it specifically because no one died." Saru said nothing. He was a man who had built his career on the certainty that the largest fleet won, that the calculus of power was simple arithmetic. The arithmetic in front of him did not add up to anything he recognized. The next time a Dominion vessel approaches a human system with hostile intent, Voss continued, I will not make the same choice. Not because I want to harm your people, but because at some point a line has to mean something. The channel closed. Saru sat in his chair. Around him his bridge crew was silent. Outside his viewports, 27 warships drifted, motionless, waiting for the 10 minutes to pass. Automated monitoring drones had captured the entire encounter on full sensor recording. By the time Saru's fleet regained drive function and began the long, quiet journey home, the footage was already moving across every relay station in the galaxy. The Teresi High Senate called an emergency session. The Veth Dominion's Council of Admirals met behind sealed doors. 14 independent systems that had no stake in the conflict between humanity and its managers quietly pulled up star charts and recalculated which side of which line they were standing on. Kale, still aboard the Resolute, watched the news feeds from a small screen in his quarters. He had stopped filing reports to the Senate because he did not know what to tell them that the footage was not already saying more clearly. He watched Saru's fleet drift helpless in the dark. He thought about the 11 months Priya had mentioned. He thought about the archive she had still not described to him. He thought about the look on Adara's face every time someone asked what the ship could actually do, that quiet, careful look of a man who knows the answer and is not sure the question deserves it yet. He turned off the screen. He sat in the dark for a while and thought about what it meant to be on the right side of something before you had been asked to choose. The invitation was Priya's idea. Voss approved it after 20 minutes of quiet argument in which she made 3 points and he had no strong answer to any of them. The first, the galaxy was already afraid. The second, fear without understanding made powerful entities do unpredictable things. The third, the archive itself in its slow and imperfect way, had indicated that concealment was not the correct path forward. That third point settled it. 3 people were invited. Kale, who had earned it by being the only compact official who had stopped pretending the situation was manageable. Far, a Veth Dominion science officer who had been quietly sending messages to Priya through back channels since the day after the fleet demonstration, not on behalf of the Dominion but despite it, because the sensor data was eating him alive. And Governor Hartwell, because she was human and this was, above everything else, a human story. Adara met them at the lower deck entrance. He looked at the 3 of them and said, without preamble, what you are about to see, we did not build it. We did not design it. We did not ask for it. It chose to be here and has not left. I have spent 11 months learning to speak to it at a basic level and I am still not sure I understand it. Be patient with the answers. The lower decks were different in a way that went beyond the visual. The air was heavier without being thicker. Sound moved strangely. Footsteps arrived half a beat late, as if the corridor was thinking about whether to carry them. The lights pulsed at long, slow intervals like something resting. Adara walked ahead and did not look back. He had stopped being frightened of this place after the first month. He had learned that being frightened was accurate but not useful. The door at the end opened when Adara spoke 2 words and pressed his palm flat against the surface. Not a scanner. The door simply recognized him. The room beyond was the size of a large warehouse. The archive filled most of it. It was not a machine. It was not alive in any way that had a name. It was a structure, surfaces shifting between solid and something that only looked solid, geometries rebuilding themselves in slow, continuous motion, materials catching light and returning it in colors not in the visible spectrum, and yet somehow visible. It was simultaneously very still and in constant motion. Far made a sound, not a word, just a sound. Hartwell put her hand over her mouth. Adara stood beside it. It is a library. The best translation I have for what it calls itself is a record of passage. It contains the full history of every civilization that passed through the drift before us. Far found his voice. How many? 417. The room was very quiet. Kale asked the question that had been building since the moment he walked in. What happened to them? Adara turned to the archive. It pulsed once, a deep, slow movement that felt like a word translated into light. Then he turned back. They ended, all of them, before what the archive calls full continuance, every single one, some quickly, some over thousands of years, but none made it to the next stage. What is the next stage? Hartwell asked. It does not describe the next stage in terms I can fully translate yet. It describes it by contrast, by telling me what the 417 got wrong. They all had the technology. At some point in their history, the archive gave every one of them the same access it gave us, and every one of them used it the same way. What way? Farr asked. To win, Adara said simply. To beat the enemy, secure the border, settle the old argument, make sure the other side could never threaten them again. Every time. Without exception. The archive tested them, they passed the capability test, went home and pointed the capability at whoever they were afraid of, and eventually it consumed them. The technology was not the test. What they did with it was the test. Kale sat down on the floor. He did not plan to. His legs simply stopped holding him up. Hartwell was still looking at the archive. It was pulsing again, slowly, in the rhythm Adara had told Priya privately reminded him of breathing, not because it breathed, but because something about it felt like the presence of a thing paying attention. She asked, "Does it know what we are going to do?" Adara said, "No, it says it does not predict. It says prediction is what the 417 did. They predicted they would be the exception. They were not." Farr stood for a long time in silence. Then he said, more to himself than anyone, 417, and not one. Not one, Adara confirmed. Kale looked up from the floor. He looked at Hartwell. She looked back. They were, in that moment, representatives of species that had spent a century and a half in a relationship built on the assumption that one was greater than the other. The archive pulsed between them in the dim light and was not interested in that assumption at all. Then we had better, Hartwell said quietly, be something different. Nobody argued with her. The Galactic Assembly Hall on Compact Station Prime had hosted 1,012 emergency sessions in its 400-year history. Staff who had worked the building long enough could tell the difference between a genuine emergency and a political performance by the way people moved through the corridors before a session. Genuine emergencies had a particular quiet, delegates walking fast with heads down, staff speaking in short sentences, refreshment tables untouched. The tables were untouched today. High Senator Orvan had prepared the stabilization resolution with 14 compact member states and the unofficial backing of the Veth Dominion. The resolution was 63 pages long and used the word protective 41 times. It called for the immediate impoundment of the Resolute pending technical review, the quarantine of its crew for evaluation, and the transfer of all recovered technologies to a joint committee for equitable distribution. On paper, a completely reasonable response to an extraordinary situation. Every delegate in the hall knew it was a seizure with cleaner language. Orvan delivered the opening address for 18 minutes. He spoke about stability, about the risks of unregulated advanced technology in the hands of a species absent from galactic development for 3 centuries, about the Compact's responsibility to all its members. He was, by any measure, an excellent speaker. When he finished, there was polite silence and the customary sound of delegates preparing to vote. Then Voss walked in. He was in uniform, not the updated human colonial uniform approved by the stewardship program, with the compact insignia on the left shoulder. The original, 300 years old, pressed with the precision of a man who had never stopped being a serving officer. Behind him came Priya Nair in her science officer's uniform and Master Chief Roland Steele in his marine dress grays. The 3 of them walked to the address podium as if they had been invited, which they had not, because no one had thought to stop them at the door. Orvan said from his seat that this was highly irregular. Voss put a data chip on the podium. He did not touch the microphone. His voice carried without it. He said he would be brief. He said he did not disagree with a single word of Orvan's address, in the sense that every word was technically accurate and entirely misleading. He said the resolution was reasonable if you had not read the file on the chip, and he recommended every delegate read it before voting on anything. He told them what was on the chip: 300 years of treaty violations, tariff extractions, Dominion incursions. The compact answered with letters: human colonial infrastructure taxed at rates guaranteeing no colony would ever become financially independent, and a stewardship program renewed every 25 years by a vote in which the humans being stewarded had no vote. He said he had transmitted a copy to every independent broadcasting network in compact space before entering the building. The hall made a sound, not a gasp, something flatter, the sound of a large number of people recalibrating simultaneously. He said humanity was withdrawing from the stewardship program, effective immediately. Human colonial systems would negotiate their own trade agreements. Gate access fees imposed by the compact were no longer recognized. Any compact or Dominion vessel entering a human system without explicit invitation would be redirected. Saru, in the observer gallery, stood up. He said no single ship could hold this position against the assembled military capacity of the civilizations in this hall, and that the captain's bravery was noted, but his mathematics were poor. Voss looked at him, then he said, "Rollin." Master Chief Steele produced a small device and pressed a single control. On every display screen in the hall, a sensor image replaced all other content, a view from outside the station. Surrounding Compact Station Prime, distributed in a perfect sphere at 40 kilometers, were the fold signatures of drift-derived technologies. Not weapons, not ships, presences. Points of force arranged like a net, calm and complete, and not doing anything at all except being exactly where they were. The hall was very quiet. Voss said, "I have no interest in this station or the people in it. Those signatures will disperse the moment this session ends. I placed them there because Admiral Saru asked a mathematics question and I wanted to give him an accurate answer." He picked up the chip. "The resolution before this body would make humanity's situation worse than it has been for 300 years. I am asking you not to pass it. I am not threatening you. A threat implies uncertainty about the outcome. I am informing you." He walked off the podium. Steele and Priya followed him. The vote was called. 16 member states voted against. 11 abstained. The resolution failed. Orvan sat with the expression of a man trying to locate the exact moment when the day had gone wrong. Farr submitted his formal resignation from the observer gallery by personal device and was 3 corridors away before anyone noticed he was gone. Saru walked out without speaking to anyone. Outside, in a corridor curving toward a private docking bay, Kale fell into step beside Priya. After a long silence, he said, "What do you do now?" She said, "We go home. We start building." He said, "Can I help?" She looked at him. Then she said, "Yes, I think you actually can. Nobody expected the shipyard to be finished in 3 weeks. Adara had told them 4 months. The workers at New Providence's orbital dock had said 2 months if they pushed hard." What actually happened could not have been planned. 700 engineers from 4 different human colonies, having heard through every unofficial channel what the Resolute had brought back, showed up in their own ships with their own tools, asking no payment, requesting only to be put to work. They slept in rotating shifts on their own vessels. They argued constantly about specifications. They built 14 ships in 22 days. The ships were small, fast, nimble in ways that large Dominion warships were not. They did not look impressive. They had the particular aesthetic of things made by people who cared more about what worked than what appeared powerful. The drift-derived systems Adara had transferred to them fit inside hulls half the size of a compact patrol frigate, because these systems did not require vast energy infrastructure. They required only that the ship be still for 3 seconds and know where it wanted to reach. Saru did not announce his attack. He took 11 ships, captains he trusted to act on conscience rather than the Dominion's newly cautious official position, and came out of FTL transit at the edge of the New Providence system at a point he had calculated the Resolute would not be covering. He was right about the Resolute. He was wrong about everything else. The 14 colonial ships were already there, not because they had been warned, though they had, because Governor Hartwell had spent 3 weeks doing what every colonial administration had been prevented from doing for 150 years, building a defense force and deploying it. The Resolute gave them the tools. The humans decided what to do with those tools. Those were two separate decisions made by two separate groups of people, and the distinction mattered enormously. The engagement lasted 19 minutes. The colonial ships used fold pockets carefully, precisely, one at a time, choosing targets and removing them from normal space with the efficiency of people who had practiced every day for 3 weeks. Saru's formation unraveled not through superior firepower, but through gaps appearing in the line where vessels had been. No wreckage, no explosion, just gone, and the remaining ships unable to fire at something they could not identify. When 7 of his 11 ships had been pocketed, Saru broadcast a general stand-down. It was the right decision, and he knew it. His flagship's drive system had already been made inert. He was sitting in a powered-down ship surrounded by colonial vessels that were, by every technical specification, vastly inferior to anything in his own fleet. The ship that docked with his flagship to take him into custody was called the New Providence Vigilance, 14 months old. Its captain was a 29-year-old woman named Bryn, who had been flying cargo runs between human colonies her entire career, and had volunteered for the Defense Force the day it was announced. She boarded with 4 Marines, introduced herself by name and rank, and told him he was being detained pending transfer to a neutral arbitration authority. Saru looked at her for a long time. She was not impressive by Dominion military standards, not tall, not imposing, a small scar on her chin, a repair patch on her sleeve. She met his eyes with the complete steadiness of someone who had decided exactly what she was doing and had no remaining doubt about it. He asked if the Resolute was nearby. She said it was not involved in this engagement. He asked why not. She said because we did not need it. He had no answer. He allowed himself to be escorted to the custody bay and sat with those words for the entire transit to the arbitration station, turning them over, looking for the angle from which they were less than what they sounded like. He could not find one. On New Providence's surface, Voss stood in an open field 2 kilometers from the capital city. The grass was a color that did not exist on Earth, bluer than green, catching the light of a sun slightly cooler and larger than the one he had grown up under. The air smelled different. The gravity was fractionally lighter. It was not home. It was the closest thing to home that existed for the 300 humans aboard the Resolute, who were standing on a colony world that had survived, adapted, and built something that could now defend itself. That was enough. In every way that counted, that was more than enough. Priya stood beside him. She told him what she had worked out from the archive's records. The 417 civilizations had all failed at the same point, the moment where they had the power to choose differently and chose the same thing instead. The archive's measure of full continuance was not a technology threshold. It was a behavioral one. Whether a species, given the capacity to dominate, chose to build instead. He asked what came next in the archive's framework. She said she did not know yet. The archive communicated slowly and she was still learning the language, but she was learning. Above them, the Resolute moved in low orbit. In its cargo bay, the archive pulsed once slowly. In the rhythm the crew had stopped finding strange and started finding steady. The rhythm of something paying attention and, for the first time in a very long record, not being disappointed by what it saw.